I'm Glo de Castro, your urban gardening mom. Now for this episode, we're going to learn about propagation through cuttings. Now, I usually do this technique for herbs. Now, most herbs can be propagated from cuttings. For example, basil, mint, oregano, thyme. Typically the herbs that are classified as dicots. Dicots meaning these are the leaves, like for example this or rosemary, the leaves grow out of a stem or a branch. Okay. Normally, I'm saying typically because not all herbs, not all dicots can be easily propagated from cuttings. So this rosemary can be propagated from cuttings, so that's what we'll do today. Okay, what do we need? First, of course, we need our cutting. For this episode, I'm going to use rosemary cuttings. So when you get your cuttings, you measure about 8 centimeters from the tip. Get a nice and healthy tip or branch, and then you will have to cut this in a slanting way. So it will, I do this as a technique so that when you stick it into your pot, it can easily go through. Now, I'm dipping it in water to preserve the freshness. Okay, about 3 cuttings. Then, of course, for watering, you will need, well, you can use ordinary water, but for this, I'm using the EM solution. This is a solution of 1 liter unchlorinated water and 1 tablespoon of EM lacto. Then mix it, and that's what we will use for watering. You will need, of course, seedling pots. I'm using pulp paper pots because this kind of material easily disintegrates, so when you transplant, you can just transplant the whole thing. Okay, and it's biodegradable. And of course, our potting media. I'm using here Classman TS3. You can use any type of potting mix, soilless potting mix. Okay, that's easily available online. And I use, to cover our cuttings, I use an upcycled plastic bottle. So you cut it into half like this, and then you will use this, 1/2 to cover. Later I'll show you how. And of course you need your scissors. And lastly, your organic rooting hormone. So if you have honey, okay, or apple cider vinegar. You can also use cinnamon powder if you have that at home. Aloe vera, if you grow aloe vera, you can get 1 leaf, and then the gel that you get out of the leaf, you can use that as a rooting hormone. Now, what does a rooting hormone do? Now, they stimulate the growth of the roots, and also they have antibacterial properties that kill harmful microorganisms so that they don't destroy or kill your cutting before they take root. Okay, so those are the natural rooting hormones. So for this episode, I'm using this because it already has all those ingredients in this. Some people, they use saliva, but I don't recommend that. They said saliva has natural fungicidal properties, but maybe it depends, because if you're sick, then you might be transferring some bacteria to your plant. So I'd rather not recommend that. So better use any natural rooting hormone that I mentioned earlier. So let's start. To start, first we need to prepare our cuttings. As I've mentioned, you have to cut about 6 centimeters to 8 centimeters pick a healthy stem. Now remove the bottom leaves and then cut the lower tip in a slanting way. So I have prepared here about 3 or 4 cuttings already, and then I dipping them in water to preserve the freshness. So we'll start by filling our pots with our potting media. Just fill all of them to the brim. Do not press down, just tap them so that they will settle. Okay. Then you need to water each pot. Now you will know that you have watered enough when the liquid starts to drip out of the pot. Okay, wait a little while. Tap to help it settle down. Okay. And then our cutting. Now, get one cutting and then dip the bottom tip in our rooting hormone. Like this. Before sticking it into our pot. So that's 1, 2. As I've said, the rooting hormone helps stimulate the roots to grow from this tip, and they also the hormone has antibacterial properties that kill microorganisms, so that the cutting will take root or grow its own roots easily without rotting. Okay, just to make sure that it's completely moist. Okay, so as you can see here, the liquid is starting to drip out of the pot. And then what do? Now remember the upcycled plastic bottle that I showed earlier that you cut into half. You will use that now to cover each pot. Okay. Now what do you do now? Now you will leave or place this in an area where it's well lit, but it's not exposed directly to sunlight. So maybe beside a window that doesn't get direct sunlight. Okay. For how long? Usually 2 weeks. Most herbs take root easily, but for rosemary it takes a little bit longer, maybe 2 to 3 weeks. How do you know that the cutting has already taken root? Usually you will observe that they grow new leaves, or they grow a little bit taller, or they grow new branches. For example, basil grows easily. In about a week, you can say that it has already taken root, because you will observe that new leaves will start to grow at the top. But for some herbs like rosemary, it takes longer, 3 weeks normally, or sometimes 4 weeks. For beginners, I wouldn't suggest that you start with rosemary. I would rather that you start with the easier ones like basil, mint, oregano, tarragon. They're easy to use as cuttings. Okay, there are also herbs that can grow roots in water. Rosemary is one of them. So, basil, mint also can grow roots in water. Sage. So what do you do? So sometimes, it's easier. You want to make sure that before you transplant the cutting, that they've grown roots already. So you can dip the cutting in water and observe after a few weeks, 2 weeks, you will observe that they've already grown their own roots. Then you can transplant that root in your pot or potting media. Okay, so that's it, friends. That's how you grow or you propagate herbs through cuttings. Happy gardening!